Alright guys, welcome back to F1 Drama, and with a matter of hours remaining until the F1 season starts with testing in Bahrain, certain teams have requested clarification on whether Ferrari's new concept for the SF23 is illegal in terms of the S-duct they've introduced to their car. What exactly have Ferrari done? Is it against the rules? We're going to look at all the details today. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate just some footage here from Mercedes of the W14's first few laps around Silverstone last week. Let's talk testing though. So Sainz, Leclerc, Sainz. That's the schedule that Ferrari are going to run with for the 6 sessions this weekend. It runs from 7:30 in the morning to 4 at night. I think that might be UK time every single day, with an hour for lunch over Thursday, Friday and Saturday. So lots of testing to be done in a short amount of time, but the teams have a lot to learn, and very quickly indeed. Will Ferrari be any good this year? That's one of the key questions. McLaren, they're looking to make progress. We saw yesterday they were blurring out parts of their floor, and people wondered exactly why. These are the details of the floor that we can see. There's nothing, I believe, too special going on here, to be perfectly honest. And even Giuliano De Kessler actually said in reply to this, and he was like, yeah, no big secrets they're trying to hide. So I don't exactly know why they were blurring out their floor, given it was only about 48 hours until testing begins, and we see it anyway, and we see it now because they missed a few frames. And there were certain other angles being revealed. Speaking of McLaren, there's also this development that they're considering a change from Mercedes power to Red Bull powertrains power at some point. Of course, this season's still Mercedes, but they're, well, potentially exploring a deal. Now, he was apparently Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren, at Red Bull Powertrains earlier this month to explore a potential deal, and Red Bull now have said that indeed there was that conversation going on. Whether McLaren are just shopping around here, right? Because we know that Honda are coming in for 2026. They, I'm sure, would have wanted to partner with Red Bull again. Red Bull were like, Honda, are you here? Are you not? Honda said, no, we're out. And then they said, all right, we'll go with Ford. That's now what they're doing. And look, I don't expect it to be like McLaren, Red Bull, Ford. That sounds pretty cursed. Or McLaren, Honda, Red Bull, Ford. I don't even know what's going on anymore with all this engine stuff. But yeah, McLaren might be shopping for alternatives. I'm sure that, I actually think them partnering up with Honda might make the most sense. But I'm sure they're going to have some flashbacks. And McLaren fans might have some flashbacks from a few years ago when that didn't work out too well. But nowadays, maybe it will, because Red Bull are looking rather good with what is effectively Honda power, despite the fact that it's renamed to Red Bull Powertrains. But this season, it's Honda Red Bull Powertrains. So hopefully you got all that. I mean, it's like some of these teams, man, they mess around a lot with this stuff. Now, let's talk Ferrari. We know their car is going to be quicker this year. How much quicker compared to the opposition? Can they fix all of their issues? They've got several problems to solve at Ferrari. The long run pace, the tyre degradation, occasional driver errors, strategy, operations, all this stuff that went wrong for them last year. Reliability, of course, the big one that I didn't even mention they've got to solve. If they can solve all of those, they can win the title. Will they solve all of them in 1 year? I think that's a bit of a question mark. Now, will they be able to run at the car they brought into the reveal, and they are intending to run at testing when the Grand Prix actually begin in, well, a couple of weeks' time at this point in Bahrain, right at the start of March, because their S-duct concept has been brought into question by other teams. This is the part of the car that it's referring to, and we'll dive into what it's meant to do, is it illegal, and what the other teams might be complaining about. Now, we don't know who's complaining about this individually, but I'm sure we can guess that it's more likely to be the top rivals of Ferrari, say Red Bull and Mercedes. I don't think Toto Wolff or Christian Horner themselves have phoned up the FIA and asked for clarification, but you would imagine that the engineers on those teams would be more likely to make such a complaint, or not exactly a complaint, but they're asking the FIA, look, is this legal? And well, obviously they want clarification on exactly how it is legal, how it fits into the rules, so they could either do something similar or try and get it banned, which, at the end of the day, if your team hasn't done something and you're asking, like, is this legal? You probably want it banned. Now, it's probably not going to be banned, and we'll see why in a second. So this is the Ferrari monocoque, and as you can see, the side pod design here, underneath it, there is a little inlet, and it's not 100% clear whether this inlet, the air flows downwards or upwards, but it's more than likely that it flows following this yellow line, as we'll see in a second, as kind of like a bypass or S-duct as it's been described. No other team has anything like this, and it's difficult to exactly describe what aerodynamic advantage this would imply, but I'll try and give it a good go from the best of my understanding. I'll watch Kyle Engineer's video to explain this. I'd recommend you guys do the same, because I'm not an aerodynamics expert. I'm not going to pretend to be, but I'll try and kind of break down what he was getting at. So this part of the car here, you can actually see it. People didn't notice it at first because it's quite small, but you guys can just about make out here this element of the inlet underneath the side pod, and it falls into the mid-chassis elements that aren't really constricted too highly by the rules, so they can do this from where this is placed apparently, and then it comes out here, right? So we mentioned this as soon as the Ferrari was launched. There's this interesting interesting outlet here that we wondered, okay, where's that coming from? Where does it start? Does it really do anything, right? Because no other team's really had anything like this. And this is what it supposedly does. So to be legal, firstly, it should be legal with its placement, but it needs to, as an intake, have some degree of cooling going on here. So it can't just pass the air with no cooling at all, but it could be used to either cool some electronics or put some sort of cooling device in here to cool the air somewhat, to cool the back of the car and help with the cooling from the engine and stuff. We'll see, but I think that should be fine. The intention from an aerodynamic perspective, I imagine, well, what car engineers discusses here is that there's some air that comes off the front wing, and they want to get some of the air that's been worked hard through this duct and up to the back of the car. So, okay, the air will then come up there and they might lose it off the back, but it might help with the cooling, and they can then take some of the cleaner air that will then go around the side of the car. This is what we discussed with Mercedes, what they might be trying to do with their front wing design, is they're trying to keep cleaner airflows around the side of the floor, so when this air that he's put here in yellow hits the beam wing at the back of the car, then it actually can be worked on effectively and better downforce generated, rather than letting all this air go around the side and kind of ruining some of that airflow at the back of the car. So this maybe is an intention here to kind of shift where they're losing some of the air they can work on in a positive way for Ferrari. So an interesting idea. No other team has really come up with anything like this, it seems, and it may give some degree of advantage. Also in my head, I'm thinking, right, if you're forcing air to go upwards, although it might not be that much air, but if you're forcing air up, there must be a corresponding downward force associated with that. So forcing air up should give some additional downforce, even though it's probably very minor indeed. So anyway, that's what they're trying to do, to my understanding. And the other teams, as I say, probably Mercedes and Red Bull, have said, hey, are you sure that this is legal? Because we didn't think to do it. So what do you think, guys? So the FIA have been asked to comment on this. Ferrari is confident that it is legal and will be hard to replicate. Certainly mid-season, I don't think anyone else is going to be trying this. And as I say, Mercedes might have had their own ideas for how they can achieve something similar, but in a very different way. So Ferrari are confident that it's going to be approved and that they're going to have no issues with it. The other teams aren't so convinced, are trying to probably get it outlawed if they can or be made illegal, but that probably isn't going to happen, especially when some clarification was coming in from Sergio Rodriguez that says from his insider sources it has been indeed validated by the FIA. So I don't believe this has been confirmed, at least as of recording, but yeah, it does seem likely that indeed this has now been confirmed and approved by the FIA. Not exactly a massive surprise, and these kind of things at the start of the season where teams will clarify whether something is legal, it's not exactly a new or particularly rare phenomenon. It happens pretty often, to be honest, if teams are saying, okay, how does this work? How is it legal? Just to get the FIA to confirm everything so they know how it is. So it's not exactly rare, but yeah, just for this one specific thing, the teams wanted to make sure that they could get this clarified, which apparently they have now, and it might give Ferrari some degree of advantage going forward as well. There's also some mention here that I wanted to say about Aston Martin. Of course, they also have Mercedes power, as do McLaren, we talked about. There's a lot of optimism around the Aston Martin camp, and of course, we've seen an awful lot of optimism from Aston Martin themselves when they come out and talk about how they've innovated their car and they're going to be so much better than last year, and they've changed 90% of their parts from last year's car, all this stuff. That's coming out from Aston Martin though, but apparently there's, even Christian Horner, I think, said that the numbers he's hearing from the Aston Martin kind of a simulator is unprecedented in terms of where they were last year. So there's a lot of optimism right now that the AMR 23 has a lot of speed inherent to that car, and some say that it is going to separate itself from the midfield. Now, we'll see if that actually happens, but it would be very interesting if the Aston Martin can be the fourth best car, if not even challenging for podiums. That'd be very exciting for Fernando Alonso, I'm sure. So yeah, lots of optimism right now from Aston Martin. I don't know how much of that is from Aston Martin themselves and how much of that is actually from other teams that have heard similar things, that yeah, this Aston Martin AMR 23 is going to be a scary car this year, but many sources over the last few days saying that it's going to be very good. So maybe L Plaid is finally coming to fruition here. I guess we'll see. The other big story of the day is the F1 Commission, and actually Mohammed Ben Sulayem was not present at this meeting in kind of his first step back really from heading up things on the Formula 1 side, but they made a lot of changes, or ratified a lot of changes here, approved several updates to the rules. So new tyres, new wet weather body testing kits, circuit changes, etc, etc. And I'll just run through these here before we close out the video. So from Imola onwards, there's going to be a brand new wet weather tyre introduced to Grand Prix weekends that is going to have better warm-up. It's not going to require tyre blankets. It's going to perform much better. Last year was a disaster for the wet weather tyre. We remember in Suzuka, for example, when they couldn't even really race in the wet conditions because the wet weather tyre wouldn't work properly. And as soon as the race begun, they wanted to go to Inters, even if it wasn't Inters conditions, because the wet weather tyre was so bad. Vettel complained about it. Many other drivers complained about how bad that tyre was. And it honestly ruins ruins a lot of the wet weather weekends because of this issue. Now, another thing that ruins the wet weather weekends was the spray, because the new cars, the way the airflow works, the airflow goes up at the back of the car rather than straight back into the car behind, and it can create an awful lot of spray that the drivers, well, have a difficult time dealing with. They're looking to introduce like a body kit, potentially. It's like almost like a mud flap, I imagine, is what they're looking at here, where at the back of the wheels, they can test something in wet weather, which should hopefully prevent some of the spray that they can attach to the cars in the wet, and then presumably when the drivers pit for dry tires, they can then detach it. I don't know, but it's an idea they're going to trial. Relaxed rules on radio messages as well. This is during the formation lap of the race. The pit lane is not allowed to talk to the drivers. That is now being relaxed and will probably not be an issue going forwards. Also for sprint race weekends, because it's such a tight turnaround from practice into qualifying and then into sprint race and then the race itself, they're relaxing the parc ferme rules. So certain parts that can often get damaged and need changing, you're allowed to change them now, whereas or during sprint weekends, whereas usually parc ferme comes into effect before qualifying and your car has to stay the same in exactly for the rest of the weekends. That's now being relaxed a little bit. They're also changing the DRS zones at least the first 5 circuits. So Bahrain, Jeddah, Melbourne, and Baku and Miami, all of those circuits are going to have some tweaks to DRS, whether in favor of allowing overtaking to be slightly easier, as in Melbourne they're adding another one, a 4th DRS zone, or potentially making it harder by reducing the strength of the DRS. For example, in Spa, it might make sense to get rid of DRS entirely on the Kemmel Straight, or at least reduce the length of it significantly. So I'm sure they're thinking of things like that. And also a slight increase in the cost cap for the final few races, because, more races means I guess you need more money. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.